any mention of Insomniac Games, and thoughts of the PlayStation exclusive Marvel Spider-Man probably springs to mind. They're also famous for creating some of the most iconic PlayStation characters and series of all time, Spyro the Dragon, Ratchet & Clank, as well as the Resistance franchise. In fact, these days the developer is owned by PlayStation. We'll get to that later. And in this introduction already, I've managed to mention the word PlayStation 3 times. In fact, if you look down Insomniac's development history, it's pretty much all PlayStation. But the game we're talking about the history and future of in this video wasn't a PlayStation game. And while it wasn't their first ever Xbox game, it was their first, and last to date, Xbox exclusive. Hello everyone, I'm Roy McCoy, and the focus of this video is on the fantastic Sunset Overdrive, third-person action-adventure shooter developed by Insomniac Games and published by Microsoft Studios. A game that quite simply waved goodbye to realism and welcomed in massive amounts of fun. While the game sold relatively well, it didn't surpass some of Insomniac's other series, but considering that this was a new IP, it certainly held its own. However, I'm going to say now that this, while it has got a massive cult following, deserved to be a major commercial success and a huge franchise. This is a brilliant game. I mean, look at it. Look at this game. It looks stunning. Vivid colours, awesome graphics, and a great open world. Just tell me it doesn't look fun. Pure, absolute fun. And when this game came out in 2014, it seemed destined to have a sequel, a bright future ahead of it. Sadly, 7 years on, we're still waiting for that sequel, and now, with a heavy heart, this one has made its way onto my What Happened To list. Get ready for a story about a great game that demonstrates what can be made if you take the training wheels off, and basically say to a developer, you can make whatever you want, and boy did they make something special. And the format of this video will go a little bit like this. First of all, we'll talk about what it was, then we'll talk about what happened to it, its development, its release and reception, before finally moving on to that all-important question, will we ever see another one? And please don't forget to smash that like button if you are a fan of Sunset Overdrive, because it really helps this video to grow. But without any further ado, let's crack on. So, what is Sunset Overdrive? Sunset Overdrive is the game that teetered on the edge of madness and brought some absolutely crazy fun, in what they refer to as the Awesome Apocalypse. Developed by Insomniac Games, who, as I mentioned in the intro, were famous for creating games and series such as Ratchet & Clank and Spyro. Before Sunset Overdrive, Insomniac Games had worked on quite linear titles, and this was to be their first open-world game. It's a third-person action-adventure shooter that is fast-paced and bags of fun, set in the year 2027, which is apparently 50 years before Cyberbug was set. Is there a connection? No. The game takes place in the open world of Sunset City, a world you can navigate by wall running, whizzing along zip lines, bouncing off items, and grinding rails like Tony Hawk. In this wonderful world, you take control of a customizable character who has a huge range of weapons to depart some humans who have turned into overcharged drinkers, or ODs for short. These are former people who drank a Fizzco energy drink called Overcharged Delirium XT, and turned into mutants. Your character is a former Fizzco employee who has to clean up the mess by making a huge mess with guns. To finish up the summary, this is a non-stop high-octane game in which you're encouraged to kill mutants, robots and humans in a quick and brutal fashion. This is a run, bounce and wall run and gun game that doesn't let you take cover, walk or stealth kill. Oh, and if you get bored, there are some bosses thrown in too. In short, this is a great game. Okay, now let's crack on with the history. Our story begins in the year 2011. After the completion of Resistance 3, part of a series that will feature in a future What Happened To video, the two creative directors, Drew Murray and Marcus Smith, went in front of Insomniac's owners and CEO Ted Price to talk about Sunset Overdrive and made one of the most infamous pitches in gaming history. Regarding their first pitch of the game, Murray and Smith in an interview with IGN had this to say: "We were really convinced people didn't want to get bogged down in details of gameplay mechanics or story, and so instead we did a presentation where we just showed a bunch of influences. Those influences range from the Hyena Men of Kenya and the Tank Girl comics to the novel I Am Legend and the TV series The Young Ones. There were 60s Halloween masks and Legos were in there somewhere." This pitch to me sounds like absolute madness, and it is something that I very much would have loved to have seen. In fact, when the two creative directors started thinking about Sunset Overdrive, they made a list of all the things that inspired them, which Murray talked about at GDC 15.
I like open world games and Centaurs and Raymond Pettibone and La Tigre. And he'd say, oh, that's cool. I like pinball machines and Tank Girl and badminton and sunset walks with my soulmate. And we'd be like, awesome, let's make that. And I mentioned my fascination with like vintage Halloween masks and Jeff Koons. And we carried gleefully on like that for a few months, combined all these loves and interests into this massive, bloated PowerPoint with no real connection or method to its madness, and presented that to the owners of Insomniac Games.
That huge list of things that were mentioned and the initial pitch just shows me how close this game was to teetering on the edge of madness. This game could have been a complete hodgepodge of random elements. However, I have to say they pulled it off. And what happened to that initial pitch? The pitch, unsurprisingly, bombed. Probably because people in the room were so shell-shocked and confused about what the hell they were watching. However, the CEO, Ted Price, must have seen something in it, and Murray and Smith were asked to come back a week later to explain how the game would actually be played. Their second presentation was apparently a lot more focused. According to that interview with IGN, Smith and Murray tackled the presentation again, focusing more on what Sunset Overdrive would be. Their second pitch revolved around a core mechanic that actually wouldn't end up making it past the planning stages. It was definitely, here's all the inspirations, and they make sense in our mind how they're going to piece together, and now our job is to show you guys how they're going to piece together. And so at the time, we said things like, it's the rock and roll of end times. Smith continued in the interview. All of a sudden, people thought we were making Brutal Legend. So it was confusing. So a huge part of this game for us was how do you communicate the box that we're making? And I think after we communicated the high action, fast paced, high energy, awesome apocalypse, and these sort of broad concepts, people ran with it. And ran with it they did. After Sunset Overdrive was greenlit, Insomniac had to pitch to a number of publishers. However, Insomniac decided that they wanted to keep the rights to the series, which led to a number of publishers giving up on it. But there was one publisher who were very keen to work with Insomniac, Microsoft Studios. Now, according to some industry professionals, Microsoft saw it as a potential coup for a developer that had predominantly worked for Sony suddenly make an Xbox exclusive. They agreed to fund and publish the game and accepted that the rights would stay with Insomniac. And while Insomniac weren't keen at first on making an exclusive, they were impressed by Microsoft's plans for the Xbox One and the concept of Xbox Live allowing two-way dialogue. So, a deal was done, and the game we know and love eventually came into being. I say eventually, because it wasn't always the idea to make this amazingly vivid, fun and crazy open world. But, like I said, they were given time and money to do what they want, and do what they want they did. So the process began on Insomniac's first open world game, and apparently biggest project until then. The original idea was to make an open world survival game similar to DayZ, defending bases at night from demons and hunting for resources in the day. There was no crazy weapons or interesting mechanics for traversing the open world. However, as you can see from the video above, something changed along the way, and we did not get a realistic open world survival game. Apparently one such change came after the team watched the music video for On Melancholy Hill by Gorillaz. After that, it was out with DayZ, and the development moved towards what Sunset Overdrive became. In fact, over the years, many games have been cited as reference points and inspiration for what Sunset Overdrive became. In terms of entertainment and fun, the inspiration was there from some Sega classics such as Jet Set Radio and Crazy Taxi. Other games referenced were things like Prince of Persia and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. The team put an emphasis on speed and movement, and decided that it needed to be self-aware, humorous and fun. In fact, some people have compared that humour to things like Ratchet & Clank and Spyro the Dragon. However, if you want more cultural references, some people even said the game was like pinball. The team wanted players to enjoy the post-apocalyptic world they'd created, using vibrant and vivid colours, and set a very different tone to something like DayZ. According to CEO Ted Price, they wanted to break the rule of shooters. They wanted none of that formulaic process of duck behind cover and then lean out to shoot. Instead, Insomniac wanted players to go berserk and focus on keeping on moving. On the whole, while developing this project, the main aim for the team was that the game should reflect what the company was about. And when you think of Insomniac, they were famous for unusual, fast-paced and vivid titles like Ratchet & Clank and Spyro. And on another note, that desire to show what the company was all about was possibly part influenced by the release in 2013 of Fuse. Fuse was a dark shooter and was a commercial and critical flop. Sunset Overdrive is very much the antithesis of that game. The game released in October 2014 after around a 3-year development cycle. The fact that this was an Xbox exclusive led to rumours that Insomniac's relationship with Sony had ended. And not only that, petitions to remove the exclusive status were also created. To give a bit of an idea of the impact, Insomniac had worked with PlayStation for around 20 years. Of course, they quickly denied the rumours that their relationship was over and that they would make other games with different publishers in future. So how was this game received? Honestly, really well. At the time of making this video, the current Metacritic score on PC is 83 and Xbox One is 81. Most critics praised the game's comedic elements, humour and performance of the voice actors, and some compared the game favourably to things like Saints Row the Third, Infamous and Ratchet & Clank. However, some of the criticism was levied at the story and the repetitive mission design. In terms of sales, considering it was a new IP, the game also sold well. According to VG Charts, 1.16 million copies were sold. And while I have to say that that was much lower than, say, Ratchet & Clank, which sold 2.38 million, according to VG Charts, and the whopping 13.2 million received for Spider-Man, this is a very different story. Ratchet & Clank was part of an established franchise, and Spider-Man is probably one of the most bankable characters that I can think of. So, considering that it was a new IP, 1.16 million copies is good. On top of that, there was a Season Pass, which allowed you to download some extra weapons, and 2 story-based DLCs. The first, The Mystery of the Moil Rig, which was released in December 2014, and Dawn of the Rise of the Fallen Machine, which was released in April 2015. And after 2015, that last DLC, well, that's kind of where the story for this game ends. So what happened to it? Well, it sold well, but not as well as other franchises. So what went wrong? Nothing. It sold okay, it was received really well, and stayed in the hearts of fans. So the important question now is, could we ever see another one? Well, that might have been more plausible until 2019. We'll get to that fact in a moment. But over the years, between the years 2014 and 2019, Insomniac Games have expressed an interest in making a Sunset Overdrive 2. In a 2017 Game Informer interview with CEO Ted Price, we learnt this. We asked Insomniac President Ted Price why there has been no movement on a sequel, and he replied, "You'd have to ask Microsoft. But with or without Microsoft's participation, Sunset Overdrive may grind again. We are passionate about the franchise, and we own it, so you may see more Sunset in the future from us," Price said. No promises and no timeline to speak of, but it is something that represents our willingness to create unexpected experiences. So, from the interview, the fact that Insomniac Games owned the rights was confirmed, and it appeared that Microsoft hadn't shown an interest in making a sequel. But, because they owned the rights, they were open to making it with a different publisher. According to IGN, he reiterated that point later in 2017. The article reads like this. Speaking on Insomniac's Twitch stream, Price was asked whether any of the studio's IP could make a return. Sunset Overdrive is something that I know a lot of our fans talk about wanting to see the sequel, he responded. We need a partner for that. That's a big game. Sunset 2 would be a very large scope game, which effectively confirms they would definitely need a partner to publish it and fund the project. And in 2018, in an interview with IGN, Price once again spoke about his desire to make a sequel. However, at this point, Insomniac were working on other projects. And in August 2019, things changed. Insomniac Games was acquired by Sony Interactive Entertainment. Then SIE chairman Sean Layden stated that Sunset Overdrive was not a priority for Sony and Insomniac. So Sony now own the rights, and Insomniac have been working on other projects. Could we ever see another one? Probably not. I mean, if we did, it would be a very, very long time into the future. Sony just seemed to be focusing on franchises like God of War, Last of Us and Uncharted, and if the rumours are true, we're not even getting a Days Gone 2. I personally can't see them greenlighting a sequel to a 7-year-old game, one that wasn't even on their own console. I really, really hope I'm wrong. And of course, while the rights are out there and the desire is out there, it is possible. But for now, I'm just going to say no, and that breaks my heart. I think this one is gone. And the only solace I can take is that the first game is still incredible and it is available on Steam. Let me know in the comments below what you think about Sunset Overdrive. But for me today, all that leads me to say is thank you very much for watching, and this is Roy McCoy, out!